Good morning and welcome to Liberty Church London's online service. My name is Tasha and my husband Johnny and we have the honour and the privilege of leading this church community here in London. And we are so grateful that you've chosen to join us. Today is Remembrance Sunday, so we're going to start by taking a moment to remember and reflect.
Did I pledge my allegiance for the purpose of progress, to a priest or a prophet, playing God in the process? Was I chasing convenience in a wave of disaster, where the captain's a cat?
Well, today is our second week of our mental health series, and we're going to carry on looking at Naaman in the book of 2 Kings, and we're going to be looking at a specific topic today that I believe can often steal our joy and affect and impact our mental health, and that is comparison. Now, let me be honest at the beginning and say I absolutely am affected by comparison. I am not immune to it. I see things and I compare myself, and this is something that as I've been preparing, I've been trying to teach myself as well. So let me start by saying we are all in this together as we journey to stop comparing and to allow that to help our mental health. So let's first start by recapping the story of Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5. So Naaman was the commander of an army of the king of Aram, and he was really highly regarded in his field, but he did have leprosy. Now, leprosy is a skin condition, and we don't know how bad it was or where it was, but we know that he had leprosy. One of her servants was an Israelite girl that had been taken into captivity and was serving him. And she said to his wife, "Look, I believe that there's a prophet in Israel who could heal your husband." So Naaman asked his master's permission to go and travel and meet this prophet. And his master said yes and sent him on his way. Now Naaman reached the house of Elisha and knocked, and Elisha sent through his servant to provide the instructions of how to receive his healing. And the servant told Naaman, "You go down to the Jordan River and dip and wash yourself 7 times and you will be healed." Now at this, Naaman gets really angry and frustrated at Elisha's response. He didn't even come out to see me. He didn't even come and touch me. What is this? And he's about to walk away when his servant says, "Hey, wait, maybe you should try it. Maybe you should just give this a go," and encourages Naaman to do so. So Naaman goes down to the Jordan River. He dips and washes himself 7 times, and he is then healed of leprosy. So I want us to focus today on a particular passage in that book, or the chapter, and it's this, 2 Kings 5:11-12. And it's after the servant has just come and told him that he needs to go down to the Jordan River. But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. So this morning I want us to take a look at 3 different aspects of comparison that can steal our joy and impact our mental health. And the first one is this: comparison of others. I wonder how many times, even maybe in this last week, you have compared yourself to somebody else. I know I have, I'm sure you have too. Maybe they've had a success and you haven't. Maybe they reached a life moment and you still haven't. Or maybe it's the other way around and you're thinking, oh, I'm so glad I'm no longer where they are. I'm so glad I'm no longer in that stage of life. Andy Andrew, the founding pastor of Liberty Church Global, she's just released a book called Friendship, It's Complicated, and I highly recommend it. And she quotes this: "We begin to envy those who we perceive to be better off than us. We begin to want what they have instead of looking at what we already have. We stop seeking after God's unique purpose for us, and we look to others to affirm who we are or who we wish we were, and for others to tell us what we're called to do. We become aware of the ways we don't seem to measure up to societal standards. We continually fall short and just can't seem to get what so-and-so got, even though we should have, because we're just as qualified, if not more so. And before we know it, we're in competition with our sisters and brothers, trying to one-up on them instead of cheering them on." Sadly, I know I've experienced this. When you see someone achieving and you want to just pull them down a peg or two so that you can make yourself feel better. But that sort of comparison is not good for our mental health. Any sort of comparison is not good for our mental health. Ecclesiastes 4:4 says this: "Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbours. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind." Our comparison culture is pushing the depression and anxiety rates up. Our culture is flooded with opportunities to compare. Maybe you go to an interview and you have to compare yourself to the other people that you don't even know are interviewing for the job. Maybe you're at a work meeting and you're trying to show how amazing you are and highlight yourself and your skills. Even spending time with friends can be an opportunity to compare lives. Maybe you think, my boyfriend isn't quite as caring as your boyfriend. Or, well, at least my job is better than yours and pays more. But also this act of competition, this act of trying to knock someone down can be really detrimental, not only to our friendships, but also to our own personal mental health. And the biggest tool for comparison in our society at the moment is social media. Now, I want to start by saying social media is not all bad, but when was the last time you checked social media? Maybe your Instagram feed or your TikTok or your Facebook page, which is for the older people, obviously. But when was the last time you checked your social media and you came away feeling really good about yourself? Was it your birthday, when everyone comments and tells you how amazing you are? Or was it at another point? For me, it doesn't happen often. I don't leave social media feeling really pumped up and amazing. I often feel a bit depressed and anxious about what my life looks like compared to someone else's. Social media is the breeding ground for comparison. Everything you see on Insta or TikTok or any other social media is an opportunity to compare. Compare what your life is like, what's happening in your life, how many likes you got, how many views, how many shares you got. Do you know that social media is actually hurting and damaging some of you? Social media is a tool, but are we using the tool or is it using us? You see, social media comparison is taking our lowest moments and comparing it to someone else's highlight reels. They call them highlights because no one actually shows their lowlights. Social media comparison is saying, I didn't realize how unhappy I was until I realized and saw how happy you were. I have a friend in Liverpool who is really good at sharing about mental health, both publicly on social media and to her friends and to people at conferences. She talks through how she is feeling each day and how she goes about managing her anxiety. But she doesn't do this in a way that's like, please feel sorry for me. She does it in a way that's encouraging, like, look, you're not the only one experiencing this. We all experience this. Now, I don't mean she uses it as a cry for help, and I think this is really important. Now, Johnny last week shared about how important it is to ask for help and reach out to get support, and he encouraged us to do so. But what he didn't mean by that was putting it out on our social media as a cry for help to our virtual, not really friends' friends, and hoping that they'll help. What Johnny meant by asking for help was to go to those in our circle, in our close circle of friends who we know personally and intimately, and asking them for help. We need to make a wise choice about how we reach out for help. We need to reach out for help, but we need to do it wisely. Instagram and social media is not often the truth. We don't broadcast our failures, our challenges, or even our weaknesses. But every success that we have or we see somebody else have is actually stacked on a, or if not multiple, failures. Did you know that failure frames the story that God tells? Throughout the whole Bible, there are stories and stories and stories of moments of failure and how God takes it and turns things around. Failure is an event or a moment. It is never a person. You are not a failure. There might have been moments in your life where you have experienced failure, but you are not a failure. And failure is formative. It should teach us. It's not final. We need to take our eyes off of what's going on in someone else's life. We need to take our eyes off of the grass on the other side, and we need to focus our eyes on where we are. And when we do that, we actually realize that where we are is pretty okay. Galatians 6:4 says this: "Pay care to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else." Let's focus on where we are now and what we are doing right now. Now, the book of Kings doesn't actually tell us that Naaman experiences this sort of comparison of others. There's no specific part of the passage that really tells us that. But there's a couple of things that I want to point out. A, he's human, and it's in our human nature to really compare with each other. And secondly, he had leprosy. So I can imagine that his thoughts often went to, oh, if only I was like Steve and didn't have leprosy, then my life would be so much better. And yet he didn't let his comparison or the thoughts of comparison stop him from going after what he wanted. You see, he was a commander in the army. He could have let his failure, his leprosy, really stop him from achieving, but he chose not to. We need to focus on where we are, who we are, and what we're doing right now, rather than thinking about the others around us and what they're doing. The second one is comparison of self. Now again, I'm going to make some assumptions about Naaman because we don't know, we can't read into the story that he actually experienced this. But again, he was human, so I expect that at points he compared himself to himself. Maybe he got leprosy during his lifetime, and so he compared his post-leprosy life with his pre-leprosy life. Maybe he compared his post-being a commander life to his pre-being a commander life, or his married life to his single life. How often do we do this, and particularly now in this season? We compare our post-COVID life, or the life that we're living now, with what life was like before COVID. Maybe you think, oh, I used to be such a social butterfly, and now I'm so anxious just to go out and spend time with people. Maybe I used to have a really good routine, and now my life is an upside-down mess. Maybe your job has changed due to COVID. Maybe your health has changed. And maybe not even because of COVID. Maybe you're comparing your pre and post a moment in your life. Maybe there was an event in your life, a health event, a family event. Maybe there was a pregnancy, a miscarriage, a marriage, a death, or an illness. And you compare your life pre and post that moment. Doing this comparison of our life now with what was before is not a good idea unless you're using that moment to see how far you've come and your transformation and growth. But when we compare how good life used to be with how not so good and unhappy you're feeling right now, it's really bad for our mental health. We can get into that place where we become depressed and anxious. Like before in the point before, we need to choose to stay focused on the here and the now. The past and the future can have a way of luring us down a path of depression and anxiety. Isaiah 43:18-19 says this: "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past, but see, I am doing a new thing." God is always working, and we need to stay focused on the here and now so we can see what God is up to. When we spend time so much focused on the past or focused so far ahead in the future, we actually miss out on what God's doing right now. So let's stay focused on the here and now, on the fact that God is here right with us right now in this moment, whatever it is you are facing. Let's forget about the past, our past failures, our past behaviors, our past actions or words, or even our mindsets, and let's get focused on the here and now. And my third area of comparison is comparison of expectations. Now, I experience this quite a lot as a parent. I have these images of what it's going to be like to take our kids on holiday or to take them away, and I get really excited and built up, and we book a trip somewhere, and it's going to be amazing, and in my head it's going to be this amazing trip where we spend the whole 2 days, 3 days really connecting as a family and loving on each other. And then you actually get to it and it is good, but it's not quite what I was expecting. Why? Because kids get tired, they get hungry. Spending a lot of time with someone can often make you realize how annoying someone might be. And so actually, the expectation that I had that this trip was going to be up here, it's going to be like a 10 out of 10 trip, actually makes me compare, because the trip actually is only maybe like a 5 or even maybe a 6 at a push trip out of 10. And so I then start comparing and thinking, oh, if only it had been what I thought it was going to be in my mind, it would have been such a good trip, but it wasn't. And now it makes it feel like it's only a 4 or a 3 because I had these big expectations of what it was going to be like, when in actual fact it was probably a 6. It was a good trip, but it wasn't quite what I had expected. How many of you growing up had a plan for your life, that you would, have a certain job, you'd be finding the one and getting married, having kids, having a successful business, all before 22? Like, so much of that is so unachievable and not what we ever experience. But oftentimes we have these expectations of what our life will be, and for some reason, whatever that is, it doesn't happen for us. And this is the final thing that we compare. We compare the way things are to the way we expected them to be. Maybe you thought that dream job would make you so happy and fulfilled, and yet it's not quite what you thought it was going to be. Maybe you thought that once you got married, life would be bliss, and yet you're realizing now that it actually takes a lot of effort and work to stay married and stay connected. Maybe that healing that God brought to you, or that financial provision, wasn't quite in the way that you expected it to be. Expectations can often mean that we feel let down. And I'm not saying don't have expectations, but having them and understanding that they are flexible and fluid means that we can change them and we're then not let down. You see, Johnny and I, we had an expectation of what the first 2 years of church planting would look like. We had this big vision. We knew that we were going to plant a church where it was going to grow, we were going to see people come and get to know Jesus and build community. And what we weren't expecting was for a global pandemic to hit 6 months in. Our expectations was that by the point of year 2, we would be, I don't know what it was, but we had these big expectations, and COVID hit and changed all of that. You see, we had to be flexible and fluid to adapt to the surroundings and to adapt our expectations accordingly. We also had expectations of what it would be like to become parents. That moment when your baby arrives in your arms and it's joy-filled and everyone talks about how much you fall in love with your baby and it's the happiest moment of your life. And if you know anything about my story, that was not the case for us. That moment when it was meant to be joy-filled and lovely was actually filled with chaos and panic, and left me with mental health issues as I had to process what I had experienced. I had to process that what I had expected was not what the outcome had been like. Obviously, Nevaeh and myself were both well and happy and healthy, and I should have been grateful for that. But I was struggling because it hadn't been like what I had expected it to be. Now, Naaman expected Elisha to come out and touch him. In fact, he got really angry and he's like, why hasn't he even come out to see me? He hasn't even put his hand on my arm. He hasn't even called on the name of his Lord. Like, really? I'm just going to go and wash in a river that's not as good as the ones back home? He got really angry. But it wasn't until his servant encouraged him to go did he go and actually get the healing. But he nearly walked away from his healing because it didn't look like what he expected it to look like. Not only had he wanted healing, but he wanted it in a certain way. And I've often felt that. I've often wanted before a healing from God or a provision from God, and I want it in that glorious, miraculous package. And yet sometimes God gives it to me in a really plain way, so much so that I nearly miss the miracle. You see, oftentimes God actually wants us to play a part and to participate in the miracle. I saw a really great post on Instagram this week, and like I said, Instagram is not all bad. And it said this: before the water turned into wine, someone had to do the ordinary, tiresome task of filling up the water pots. We want the new wine to just suddenly appear, but Jesus calls us to fill up the jars first. In short, God often wants us to participate in our own transformation. You see, Naaman had to do the ordinary thing of washing himself, and he had to do it through repetition. He had to do it 7 times. You see, there is power in complete obedience, because partial obedience is actually just disobedience. What if he had stopped at wash number 5 thinking, it's just not worth it anymore? What if Joshua and his troops hadn't finished doing the 7 laps around the walls of Jericho? What if God's asking you to do something and do it repetitively and you stop halfway through? Maybe God is calling you to do something really simple in order to experience breakthrough in your mental health. Or maybe he's calling you to do something repetitively, and as you do that, you experience the breakthrough. Miracles can look different to your expectations, but the truth is that it's still a miracle. Naaman still got his healing, even if he didn't get it the way he'd expected it to happen. It didn't happen according to his expectations, but the miracle still happened. Romans 9:20-21 says this: but who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make the same lump of clay into 2 different things? You see, God is God. We are not. And so sometimes he's going to bring about miracles and healings and transformation into our lives in a way that we weren't expecting. As humans, we often don't understand why God is doing it, why he's doing it in a certain way or in a certain time frame. But we need to stop comparing our life and our experiences to our expectations. So what can we do to help ourselves stop comparing? And I've got 4 fairly quick points here. The first one is this: we can cultivate an attitude of gratitude. When we do this, when we think about what we are thankful for in the here and now, it stops us reflecting on the past, thinking too much on the future. It stops us comparing our lives to someone else's, and we can be just grateful for where we are right now. Whatever you magnify in your life always gets bigger. So let's choose to magnify gratitude, not the things that we're complaining about or comparing. The second thing is this: we need to completely unplug. Sometimes in your life, you actually need to completely unplug from these things, from phones, from computers, from iPads. We need to completely unplug from those moments that cause us to compare. We all get FOMO, right? We all have that fear of missing out. But what if we missed out? Like, what if we missed out? I think we need to learn the art, as my friend Ashley calls it, of JOMO, the joy of missing out. Anxiety comes when we dwell on the past or the future. We need to stop, we need to put the phone down, we need to engage with the now. And in this world of information, we have actually lost our wonder. We need to unplug, we need to completely unplug, we need to find the joy of missing out, and we need to find the wonder that we had once. Thirdly, we need to have habits and routine. When you don't know what to do, maybe you wake up in the morning and you're feeling super anxious or depressed. When you don't know what to do, the habits and the routines kick in and they help you keep going. It's not like saying, oh, I'm just going to wait till I have a good thought, or I'm going to wait till I feel motivated or I feel like doing something. Instead, by having habits and routine, I've actually programmed my reaction. I've created a habit. And so now I'm going to act my way into a situation, and I know that my feelings will catch up with me. Habits and routines are so important. And this is like what I was talking about in terms of doing something repetitively. Naaman had to wash 7 times. There was repetition. We have to do things repetitively in order to experience wholeness and freedom from our mental health. And the fourth thing is this: take every thought captive. We need to think about the thoughts that come into our mind, and we need to decipher, are they good thoughts, are they God thoughts, or are they thoughts that I can cast away? You see, many of us catastrophize. Now, catastrophizing is an irrational thought that a lot of us have in believing that something is far worse than it actually is. Catastrophizing can generally take 2 forms: making a catastrophe out of the current situation, or imagining making a catastrophe out of a future situation. When we do that, we actually need to take those thoughts captive. Now, this is one of the things that I do a lot, and I often do it with my children. It's like, what if they fell over right then and tripped and rolled into the road, and it would be a disaster, and my thoughts suddenly from what if they tripped over becomes this massive catastrophizing, and I start to compare them what that life would be like. We need to take those thoughts captive. We need to cast them away. So comparison can steal your joy, and it can really impact your mental health. Why don't you think right now of one thing you can choose to do this week? Maybe it's a daily thing. Maybe it's being thankful every day. Maybe it's just choosing to not look at your social media until 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it's choosing not to look after it past 9 o'clock at night. Whatever it is, think about a way that you can help limit comparison in your life. Now, we're talking about mental health, and that can be a really tough topic for so many of us. And so many of us are experiencing or have experienced it. And as a church, we really believe in the power of prayer. We believe that praying to God makes a difference, and He actually breaks into our situations and brings breakthrough. As a church, we would like to pray for you. And so I'd like to encourage you, in the link below, in the description below, there's a link called Ask for Prayer. And I'd really love for you to take a moment to click the link and let us know what you need prayer for. Maybe it is to do with mental health. Maybe it's something that's come up through this message that you need support with. Maybe it's something else completely, but you want prayer. Well, myself, Johnny, and our prayer team, we would love to pray for you this week. And not just today, but throughout the week we will be praying, and we can reach out to you and let you know that we've been praying for you. So take a moment, fill in that link and ask for prayer. But we also love celebrating all that God's doing, and we love hearing where God is breaking into your life. So if you've had a praise report recently, if God's done something for you and you want to celebrate it, we would love to celebrate it with you too. So why not click the link, Ask for Prayer, and instead of filling in a prayer request, fill in a praise report so we can be celebrating with you. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Liberty Church London today. Our online service, we love having you join us. If you are new or newer, we would love to connect with you. So please also go to the description below and click the button Connect with Us. That way we can connect with you throughout the week and help you find your place and your home here at Liberty Church London. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you next Sunday.